Can you please tell me what was your personal experience that is related to Borat film?
I moved to the UK more than 10 years ago. And so when I moved here, it was the first time I actually heard about the film, and I heard about it from British people who were telling me, "Have you heard about this film? It's hilarious, and like you should definitely watch it." So, which I did, and only really lasted for 10 minutes because it was a complete nonsense. It didn't make any sense to me at all. And following that, kind of the following, I guess, 10 years, I've been facing all the ignorant, ridiculous, stupid questions about my culture, about what Kazakhstan is, and whether whatever was performed and presented in the film was actually true, which really surprised me because obviously we've got, everyone's got access to internet. It's really not that difficult to Google and check whether, certain things are true or not. But what really shocked me is that people don't do that. They really take whatever is presented in the film at face value. They actually think that everything that has been presented is true. So kind of following those 10 years, I had to invest a lot of energy into explaining things, and I felt like it was like another job for me that was created by this film, and trying to really destroy those stereotypes and those myths that were created. So it wasn't really fair. I felt that people didn't have any idea of what Kazakhstan is, but instead they were presented with some other created mythical reality that I had to then deal with. And yeah, it was quite a traumatic experience for me, because I think that films like this, they create and normalize that behavior of creating structures in the society, kind of saying that one culture, one dominant culture is more somehow acceptable and valuable than another that perhaps is less known. And therefore it's okay to say whatever you want to say, and it doesn't really matter. But I don't agree with that, because it does affect real people every day. And I also think it normalizes that discriminatory behavior, because people feel that if that's something that is portrayed in the film, therefore it's okay to also behave like that in real life. It's whatever the character is saying in the film, it's also okay to say that in real life. But I think they're missing the point. I mean, I understand what the genre of the film is and what the character is trying to do, but unfortunately people don't understand it, and they don't really I guess the film is kind of missing the point. It's not really landing the point that it's trying to make, essentially, with people. And I think that's where it's failing for me personally.
If the movie is created to fight, racism, then how is it fighting racism with racism?
It's a very kind of old-fashioned way of dealing with the problems surrounding racism. I think that's how media used to, or comics used to approach this problem, but I think it's very out of date. I don't think it's acceptable to do that today. I think I was okay to kind of move forward and kind of forget everything that happened since 2006. But I think the fact that it's coming out today, after we had all the positive things that happened this year with Black Lives Matter and with the US elections, it doesn't make sense that alongside all those things, and in the UK as well, we had a wave of those changes made on media, whereby films such as, or series such as Little Britain were removed from broadcasting, because it was actually doing exactly what Borat is doing with Kazakh people, but it was doing with Black people. And I think that's where I personally don't agree with it, because I mean, it just doesn't feel like we're moving forward. We're making one step forward and we're making two steps back.
Can you give me example of the kind of comments and jokes that you have had to deal with over the time?
Recently, someone asked me if it's true that Kazakhs actually drink camel piss. And it was kind of asked with the smile and love on someone's face. I personally don't find it funny, because people actually think that we are so different to any other human, to think that whatever anyone else finds disgusting that we would enjoy. I think it's just othering our culture even more than it has been so far.
Well, how about keeping our women in cages? How about anti-Semitism?
I think I felt that it was betraying my grandfather's memory, because he participated in the Second World War and he fought for everyone's freedom and equality. And essentially to say the opposite, that we are somehow, that we're discriminating Jewish people, is a complete nonsense. It's the complete opposite of what actually our ancestors were fighting for. And it just makes me extremely sad to think that so many years later we're having to deal with these issues.
What would you tell people that are telling you to enjoy the jokes and telling you to laugh with them at this comedy? What would you tell them?
Well, I think we need to treat each other as humans. I think forget about the fact that I'm Kazakh and then someone else is, of another culture or ethnicity. I think if I find it hurtful and disrespectful, then you should probably listen, not try to convince me otherwise, or not try to convince me to feel something else. Just try to accept my feelings and see them as valuable and something that needs to be listened to and responded in a respectful way.
Has this movie impacted your life in any way, besides the jokes and stuff? I mean, is there a situation that somehow impacted your life in a negative way?
Some comments around Kazakhstan that I had to deal with at work, which I tried to address, and when I did, I was faced with more bullying, and essentially, unfortunately, I couldn't escalate it more, because it was from someone more senior than I am, and it's hard to address those things or to tackle them sometimes, because it affects your livelihood. It can affect your career prospects and therefore your earnings, and so it makes you completely powerless and dependable on that person that is actually bullying you. And I know that a lot of companies and corporations create environment or try to create certain rules whereby it should be easier for people to report it. But unfortunately, the reality is that when you're faced with racism from someone who's holding more power than you do, it becomes quite difficult to challenge it.
I'm sorry you had to deal with that. And I commend you on your bravery. I know we're not showing your face, and I know there's a real reason for that, and I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. I know people who have lost the business deals, and I know people who would walk into the meeting and they had lost the deal, because as soon as they said that they're from Kazakhstan, everything went in like a complete hell. People were laughing, people were not taking this serious, and essentially there's probably like some prejudice, because as you said, people do take this movie at face value, and they do judge us by that horrible stereotype that Sacha Cohen managed to build for us. He created that stereotype. There's nothing of us in it, and we are having to lose businesses, a fear for our jobs. Our kids have to be bullied at schools, etc. And those are all real stories, but not everyone has the courage to come up and say something. It is people are scared to do that.
Yeah, so I think this film creates that kind of foundation for microaggressions in kind of supposedly safe environments. I think that can be safe for people that essentially behave racist. I'm not going to call them racist. I think a lot of people probably are not educated enough to actually understand what they're doing. I think any such films, they normalize that kind of behavior of essentially bullying. When the second film came out, unfortunately, I had to seek some support in terms of mental health. I guess I fell into some sense of despair that I felt that my voice was taken away, that I couldn't really, whatever I say, I'm not gonna outshout such a big corporation as Amazon. I thought about the fact that everyone that I've met, kind of in the last 10 years have seen this film. And it just kind of blew my mind just thinking about, with Amazon support, how many more people will see it in the world. And that is, there will be just no escape for me. I will just have to, deal with this for the rest of my life, because there's just no way out of it. So yeah, as a kind of, I think it kind of caused me feeling quite depressed about life. So I had to seek that kind of extra support and help to kind of deal with that situation and kind of think about what I'm going to do.
I'm so sorry you have to deal with that. Well, you're not alone. You're really not alone. We are now, I mean, there's always a silver lining to anything, right? And I think, our voices were taken out during the Soviet Union. We couldn't speak up for ourselves.
Yeah.
And now I think the reason why we feel it so strongly is because there's an echo of the past pain that our nation had to live through, and now we deal with it with living in foreign countries. We have to deal with our voices taken out again. People telling us to laugh with them at some horrible depiction of a nation that has nothing to do with our nation, apart from stolen name and stolen national symbols.
I think it's also a result of kind of this imperialist era. I think the producer, the creator of this film still approaches it with a very kind of imperialist mindset. And I think, why kind of the developing countries, like, why are they still developing, or why do we even have developed and developing countries? And I think it's all a result of imperialist era where we had colonies. And I think, those dominant cultures today, they benefited from those times, they benefited from those colonies, and they still approach those cultures and those countries. And I'm not just talking about Kazakhstan. I think it's from a wider sense in terms of how the world is divided into developed and developing. I think the more dominant cultures are still approaching those countries as inferior, not just from an economical point of view, but I think it's also from cultural. No basis to think that, because I mean, there are a lot of examples of those cultures to have ancient civilizations, and there's just no reason for those cultures to be considered inferior, but unfortunately they are, because of colonization, because of imperialist era.
And unfortunately, we on individual level having to deal with that, and that is beyond what's called unfair. It's actually in today's day and age of awakening to issues like racism, this it seems impossible to be true, and yet we're living it again.
Exactly.